Galilee, but he didn't want anyone to know it. This was because he was teaching his disciples, the human one will be delivered into human hands. They will kill him, and 3 days after he is killed, he will rise up. But they didn't understand this kind of talk, and they were afraid to ask him. They entered Capernaum, and when they had come into a house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about during the journey?" They didn't respond, since on the way they had been debating with each other about who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be least of all and the servant of all." Jesus reached for a little child, placed him among the 12, and embraced him. Then he said, "Whoever welcomes one of these children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me isn't actually welcoming me, but rather the one who sent me."
Thank you, Maggie. It's always a journey when you go up north. That's where Jesus and his disciples were going. That's what they did. They went up north from Mount Tabor, the place of transfiguration and frustration, back into the region of Galilee where it was quieter, back to a place where the miracles first happened, back to Capernaum. Let Andrew share the screen so you can see the map. I want you to just really know that this place is real, right? We have in the center of our map this morning the Sea of Galilee, and going out from the bottom of that map goes the Jordan River. The Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, that's our north-south axis in our in the Holy Lands. And then you can find Nazareth, which is in red, right there. Andrew's so aptly pointing out. And then if you could just go to a little bit to your right and down, you'll find Mount Tabor. There it is. And from that place, Mount Tabor, Jesus and his disciples truly went up north. They went along the Sea of Galilee, perhaps through Tiberias and Magdala, but up to Capernaum. And there it was that they were in the home again of Simon, the very first place where Jesus did a miracle after he came out of the desert after his baptism. But the disciples weren't the only ones who have been to this place. And share the next picture. This is a photograph taken by Mike and Maggie. I'm not sure if that's either one of them in the picture, but they also walked on this trail. So you can see what the land looks like near Capernaum. It is a beautiful region of hills and the lake, the Sea of Galilee, and also just peace and quiet. So this is the place where Jesus was up north, where he was able to breathe deeper and to reflect. Now, you know that place in your own life, right? It might be up north or out west. It might be down south or out east. Our up north is where promises feel like possibilities. This place, the undulating land of hill and lake, is where Jesus shares with his disciples the promise they don't want to hear. It's a promise that will drown them in sorrow. It's a promise that in the home up north had possibilities that they couldn't even imagine. Are we any different? Do we see the depths of possibility in the resurrection of which Jesus speaks? We hear the prediction. This is the second time in the Gospel of Mark we've heard the prediction. We know the reality of Palm Sunday with its euphoria, its hosannas, right? We know Maundy Thursday and the betrayal. We know Good Friday that's filled with heartache and death. But do we truly know the power of Easter? What it means for us in terms of how we engage in the world? Are we brave and fearless when we face the inhumanity and injustice that Jesus is constantly calling out and challenged in the power of empire? Now, Jesus tells his disciples that he's going to die. But in the meantime, between now and that time, he's going to do everything he can for the least of these, and the world won't like it. because it messes with the way they measure greatness. He'll live the way of God's forgiveness and love. Jesus only gets angry. If you look at the stories, Jesus only gets angry when people forget to keep the vulnerable and the worthless ones in the center of the picture. He gets angry when people think that it's a zero-sum game of God's love and grace, that God's love, my friends, God's love is not cake. Just so you're sure on that, God's love is not cake. It's not like I get my piece and therefore there's not enough or there's less for you. I get mine. I get my belovedness. I get my greatness and God's eyes. And that does not diminish in any way, shape, or form God's love for you. There's enough. There's enough to conquer death. This is the power of the resurrection. But do we trust that power? And I wonder, what would it look like if we did? As so often is the case, I think we're a lot more like the disciples or the disciples than we might want to admit. Jesus is telling them what will happen, how it will go down. And they are totally involved in another sidebar conversation. They have seen the crowds grow. Throughout the Gospel of Mark, by this point, the crowds grow and grow and grow and grow. They've seen the miracles. They're back in the place where that first one took place. They sense the power of Jesus. But instead of tapping into the power of God's love, they've tapped into the trappings of the world. They were wondering who would be the greatest. The greatest what, I wonder? How do we assess greatness? Think for a moment for the criteria that you use to assess greatness. I want you to think, who is the greatest person in your life? And it could be is or has been. And I also want you to think of who's the greatest person in the world. I did a little quick Google search, and who do you think made the top 25 in the world? So you can unmute yourself if you have any idea of who might be on that top 25 in the world that was on your list. Or anybody got an answer? Unmute yourself.
Mother Teresa.
What's that?
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa. Oh, she's not on this list. Maybe she should be, right?
I'm thinking people with money or political influence. So Bill Gates, Donald Trump, Joe Biden.
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
None of them. Other choices? They're all good people. These are all, and we assess greatness one way, right? I have no idea what criteria this list is created from, but you can.
How about Bill Gates?
Nope.
How about the Pope?
The Pope? Nope.
Gandhi?
Yes. Gandhi made it. Number 14.
Einstein.
And Nelson Mandela.
Mandela did not. No.
But Albert Einstein.
And I couldn't hear that one. Einstein? Yes, Einstein made it. He is number 2.
How about Martin Luther King?
Yes, number 12.
Anyone from the Kennedy family?
From the who? Which family?
Kennedy?
Kennedy? No Kennedys.
Oh.
I give you 2 more guesses.
Jesus.
Yes, number 1, of course. One more guess.
Buddha?
Buddha, yes. Buddha made it number 20. So I'll give you the list. And this is from number 25 to number 1, according to this list that I probably couldn't find again, and I didn't cite it. And I have no idea what the criteria were, but there's their 25. Gutenberg, Napoleon, Martin Luther, the original, Karl Marx, Julius Caesar, number 20 is Buddha, Nikola Tesla, Hitler, Moses, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi's number 14, Socrates, Martin Luther King Jr., number 12, Shakespeare, Plato, Darwin, Alexander the Great, Galileo, Muhammad, Aristotle, Da Vinci, Newton, Einstein, and of course, number one is Jesus. I was really glad. I just picked the list. I didn't even see it, who was number one, because they do it in reverse order on the website. So I was really glad that Jesus was on there. But so I don't know. I think what's interesting is that every single person on this particular list, and only one person you mentioned isn't this, all of them are men. So Mother Teresa was the only name listed that wasn't a man. And they're all noted for these, in this list of 25, inventions, war, and philosophy. These are some of the criteria that we use, right? That's somebody put a list together and figured out some criteria and then said these are the top one. But were any of these people on my 25 or the ones that you listed up your greatest person? I doubt it. And I think how we measure greatness matters. Jesus heard the conversation between his disciples, right? He calls them out on it. He knew what they were talking about and why. And what does he do? He puts a child in the center of the conversation and shifts the focus from the powerful to the vulnerable. He says, if you're going to welcome a child, you welcome me and the one who sent me. But I do not think this is a conversation about hospitality. It's a conversation about power. It shifts the focus to those filled with promise and possibility and how we engage with that. What do we do and say in the presence of a child, on the behalf of a child, to the benefit or detriment of a child? They are watching everything we do. And if you don't trust me, that they're watching everything we do and trying to do it back, I have video proof. So I'm going to have Andrew share the screen again.
Dada's going to jump. Watch Dada. Okay, Freddie, you jump. You try. Yeah. Now you try. Yeah.
Good job, buddy. Are you jumping in puddles? Are you jumping in puddles?
Should Dada jump? Whee! You jump. You Freddie try. Yeah. Oh, and now we're gonna be soaking wet.
Yeah, it's okay. He already was.
They are watching everything we do. From the simple act of learning to jump to the complex tasks of living and loving in the world, they're watching us and learning everything. Absolutely everything. It's just the same way you and I learned everything we know, right? And believe it or not, I hope we continue to do that, right? I hope we haven't lost the desire to learn things, but they learn how we measure greatness. According to Freddie, Joe is the best jumper in the world. He's the best dad in the world. He's the only dad he's got, right? But did you see how he made all the noises? He couldn't do the task, but he made all the noises, all the motions except that liftoff. How we measure greatness matters. It could be that they're historical or athletic or artistic or philosophical criteria that we use, but how we measure greatness really is the same way you measure the greatest person in your life, by how much they loved you. Not for your perfection or your performance, right? Freddie never got off the ground. And not because you earned it or you were found worthy, but for who you truly are. Their greatness is measured in the way they saw possibility and promise in you. They, I imagine, were trustworthy. They, I imagine, were with you in the storms of life and gave you a loving and supportive presence no matter what. They might have disagreed with you. They might have not liked what you've done or how you've gotten yourself into whatever situation it was in. but they were there. Their greatness is measured by how they treated a child. This looking at a child requires us to face all the ways we've divided ourselves and used policy and politics to legitimize our unwillingness to do this kind of living, because that's what we have done. We have been unwilling to do this very kind of living. Children suffer each and every day. In our community, there's abuse and neglect and hunger. And even here in the United States, you think, oh, there's a wonderful country. And it is. But there are children who can light their water on fire because of ground contamination. There are children in Flint and in Milwaukee who will suffer the damage of lead poisoning because of the pipes. Children throughout the world struggle to survive this very day, not because it's necessary, but because we've been unwilling to live the way that Jesus shows us. Children are set by Jesus in our midst to remind us how to measure greatness, to remind us of the power of the resurrection that declares the power of God's love, of life, is the greatest power. When all children, those we know and those we don't, can live into and out of their belovedness, when they can grow into the promises and possibility, then we'll be doing what Jesus asks us to do. And until that point, we haven't yet done it. We need to be great in a way that matters, to be great in our active, persistent, trustworthy presence and advocacy for all children. Jesus took the disciples up north, right? And there he taught them about the depth of God's love for the world in a place where they could rest and think about it and wonder about it and struggle with it. And then he showed them what was required. He showed them what was required to welcome and love the most vulnerable. Now, we may not be up north, but we are in the time of Lent, a time where we give ourselves permission to rest and to breathe and to consider the fullness of the resurrection story. And we need to remember the children, our children. And all the children of the world are watching us and imitating everything we do. May we take time in Lent to consider those who are great in our lives and then do all that we can to be the greatest too. Remembering that the only measure of greatness that truly matters is in the eyes of children. All children who are filled with possibility and promise, may we be great in their eyes. Amen.